everyone, and thank you for tuning into LearnCast. My name is Brooke, and today we will be discussing supply and demand curves. To start off, let's talk about demand curves. The basis of demand curves is the demand schedule, a table showing the quantity consumers are willing to buy at a specific price, or the quantity demanded. When plotted on a graph, these points become the demand curve. The x-axis is the quantity of the good demanded, while the y-axis is the price of the good. This brings us to the law of demand. All other things being equal, a higher price of a good will lead people to demand a smaller quantity of it. For example, consumers would be willing to buy 1,000 pounds of oranges for $2 a pound, but only 700 pounds of oranges for $3 a pound. When these points are graphed, the demand curve slopes down. This brings us to shifts in the demand curve. In the real world, all other things can't be equal, like the law of demand states. There are many different factors that go into the prices that impact the quantity demanded, which change over time. The change in demand is seen as a shift right or left on the demand curve. An increase in demand is represented as a rightward shift, where consumers demand more of the good or service, while a decrease in demand is represented with a leftward shift, where consumers demand less of the good or service. Before we could talk about what can cause the shifts in demand, let's differentiate between shifts in demand and movements along the demand curve. Movements along the demand curve are still within the original demand schedule, while shifts in demand change the demand schedule, or the quantity of goods consumers are willing to buy at a certain price. What can cause these shifts? There are 5 main factors that can cause a shift in the demand curve. They are represented by the acronym PYNER, spelled P-Y-N-E-R. P stands for preferences, or what the consumers like. If the consumer preferences for the product increase, then the demand curve will shift right as consumers want to buy more, and vice versa. Y stands for income. If consumers' income increases, they will be able to buy more of the product than before, increasing the demand and shifting the curve to the right. The opposite is also true. Less income leads to less demand and a shift left. N stands for the number of buyers. This includes population changes. The market demand curve is made of the combined individual demand curves of all the consumers in the market, so the more consumers in the market, the demand will increase and the demand curve will shift right. E stands for expectations of further price. Consumers ultimately want the best price, so they're willing to wait for sale or buy if they believe the price will go up in the future, leading to an increase in demand and shift of the demand curve right. Conversely, shifts can also occur due to expectations of consumer incomes. If a consumer believes that they will have a higher income in the future, they will wait for the higher income to purchase the product, causing a decrease in demand and subsequent shift left. R stands for prices of related goods. 2 goods are substitutes if a rise in price in one good causes consumers to want to buy the other good. Goods are complements if a fall in price of one good makes consumers willing to buy the other good. Decrease in demand and a shift left on the demand curve could be caused by an increase in the price of a complementary good or a decrease in the price of a substitute good. And now let's focus on supply curves. Similarly to the demand curve, the supply curve is based on a supply schedule, the amount that producers are willing to produce and sell at a specific price. When graphed, these points turn into the supply curve, with the x-axis being the quantity of the good and the y-axis being the price of the good. While the demand curve slopes down, the supply curve slopes up. A good way to remember this is through the word up in supply. The curve slopes up because of the law of supply. A higher price leads to a higher quantity supplied, because producers want to make as much money as possible. Now we get to shifts in the supply curve. Just like with demand, the economy is always changing, which affects the supply. A change in supply causes a shift of the supply curve. An increase in supply is seen as a rightward shift, while a decrease in supply is seen as a leftward shift. Before we can learn about what can cause shifts in supply, let's differentiate between shifts in supply and movements along the supply curve. Movements along the supply curve are still within the original supply schedule, while shifts in demand change the supply schedule, or the quantity of goods producers are willing to sell at a certain price. What can cause shifts in the supply curve? Shifts in the supply curve are determined by another acronym, CENTR, spelled CNTTR. C stands for cost of inputs. An input is a good or service used to create another good or service. If there's an increase in input, then the producers are less willing to produce it at any price, causing a leftward shift in the supply curve. E stands for expectation of profits. If a producer believes that they will sell more of a product in the future, they will produce less now to save some product for the future, and vice versa. N stands for number of producers. The market supply curve is a combination of individual producers. So if there are more producers in the market than before, the curve will shift right as there's more supply in the market. The opposite is also true. T stands for technology. Technology is the methods that can turn inputs into goods and services. Better technology can allow producers to spend less on inputs and make the same output. This will decrease the production costs and increase the supply, shifting the curve right. The second T stands for taxes/subsidies. A tax is a payment made to the government added to goods and services. A tax will make inputs more expensive, leading the producer to want to produce less of the item, causing a shift left. A subsidy is money given to a producer by the government. A subsidy makes the cost for the producer lower, so the producer is incentivized to make more, causing a shift right on the supply curve. R stands for the price of related goods and services. If the price of a substitute good goes up, then the supply of the other good goes down, so the producer can make the most money, shifting the curve left. If the price of a complementary good goes up, then the price of the other good goes up, so the producer can make more money, shifting the curve right. And that does it on supply and demand curves. Thank you for joining me for a review of supply and demand curves. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check our website to stay up to date with the latest releases. Until next time, listen, learn, repeat.